lang na pag titingnan natin dito sa household consumption expenditure, so nakapaloob dito yung ating yung tinatawag na natin sa circular flow diagram ng ating 4 factors of production. Talagang nakakalungkot na po talaga yung ating economic growth. Because in our household, dito yung ating mga laborer, kung titingnan po natin talaga, ay napakababa ang mga income ng ating mga manggagawa. So, kung mababa ang income ng ating mga laborer, so hindi natin, kumbaga, sorry, medyo na, nakakram. So, dito kasi sa ating 4 factors of production, nakapasok din po kasi sa ating GDP kasi nakapaloob dito yung mga source of resources na. So, kaya pumapasok dito yung tinatawag nating scarcity na nagiging problem natin sa ating economic growth rate. So, hindi lang sa ating source of, kumbaga sa ating mga services, ang ating nagiging problem sa pagkaka-apekto ng ating economic growth. Kasi kung titingnan natin dito sa ating resources ng services natin sa mga mga laborer natin, napakaraming unemployment, unemployment rate dito sa ating bansa. So, paano tayo magkakaroon ng papasok dito sa percentage ng ating national income, mismo sa ating bansa, ang daming mga walang trabaho sa ating bansa. So, ang ginagawa ng ating mga mga laborer natin, nangingibang bansa sila. Okay? So, naapektuhan pa rin yung ating dito sa ating, kumbaga, sa ating economic growth rate. Kumbaga, nababawasan tayo ng mga mga laborer. So, kung titingnan natin sa ating dito na lang sa ating Philippine economic growth rate, kung mapagtutuunan lang ng pansin ng ating gobyerno, ang ating agriculture siguro, medyo tataas ang ating economic growth rate. Kasi kung napapansin nyo, classmates, Sir Doc, ang ating agriculture talagang napabayaan na. Kaya kung papansinin po natin, mas marami tayong ini-import ngayon na mga bigas. Kung napapansin po natin na ang ating mga bigas ngayon na kinakain ay mas marami na yung mga imported kumbaga na mga bigas. Then, ganun din yung mga, kung papansinin natin, mga sibuyas natin, mga imported na rin.
Pati galunggong, ini-import na, Juliet, pati galunggong, di ba?
Pati galunggong. So, paano natin kumbaga yung ating economic growth rate dito sa Pilipinas, Doc? So, ang hirap natin, kumbaga, kung titingnan natin, yung percentage talaga ng ating economic growth rate ay talagang napakababa. Paano tayo makakaahon sa ating economic situations? Kasi dito pa lang dito sa pagtutunan natin ng pansin ditong ating i-prepare na export minus import, talagang negative tayo dito. So, ano yung pumapasok sa ating national income? Diba kasi nung panahon na, nung bata po ako, Doc, so pag meron na kaming, kumbaga, imported na, na gamit, so tuwang-tuwa ako kasi hindi ko alam na pag imported ay nakaka-apekto sa ating economic growth rate. So, lalong lumala ngayong natin, itong situations natin ngayon. Kasi kung papansinin natin ngayon na mas marami na tayong mga imported products dito sa Pilipinas kaysa yung ating sariling products. So, anong mangyayari sa ating gross domestic product? So, para yung ating economic growth rate ay tumaas. Di po ba, Doc? So, sa mga sapatos na lang, sa Marikina, dati di ba ang ating mga products sa Marikina, yun yung mabili na ibinibenta natin sa market. Now, in our problem, nagdatingan yung ating mga China products. So, natabunan yung mga products natin sa Marikina. So, nawala yung mga, kumbaga, kung titingnan natin kasi sa kakayahan ng mga Pilipino, hindi na nila kayang bilhin yung mga ating product sa Marikina kasi mas mataas yung kanilang presyo compare sa products ng mga China. So, ano nangyayari sa ating gross domestic product? So, bumabagsak yung ating gross domestic product because of our imports of goods and services. So, ang nangyayari, ang mga ginagamit natin mostly ngayon ay mga galing na sa mga ibang bansa. So, siguro hindi naman natin maipagkakaila na talagang yung mga, kumbaga mga yung mga ating our individual, yung kaya nilang, yung kanilang mga source of income, ang kanilang kaya lang talagang mga bilhin ngayon ay yung mga China products. Sorry for the word na talagang kahit ako mismo, napapansin ko talaga na pag wala talagang budget, kasi the source of income ng, for example, sa isang family ay talagang kulang, nagkakaroon tayo ng scarcity. So, pumapatol tayo sa mga imported products from China. So, doon bumabagsak yung ating gross domestic product na tinatawag na ikinababagsak ng ating economic growth rate. So, dito pa lang sa ating equation ng ating national income, makikita natin ng ating economic growth rate ay talagang nakakalungkot. So, kapag example ko na lang, Doc, dito sa ating bansa kasi yung ating economic growth rate. So, kung titingnan talaga natin, paano natin iaangat ang ating economic growth rate? Lalo ngayon, nagkaroon tayo ng inflation. Okay? So, dahil nga po sa giyera na nangyari sa bansa ng Russia at saka sa Ukraine. So, affected na naman ang ating economic growth rate. So, paano na naman ito yung ating gross domestic product na tinatawag? So, titingnan natin kung ano nga ba yung ating mga nakapaloob sa ating gross domestic product. So, in our gross domestic product can be expressed in two different ways. So, we have nominal GDP and real GDP. So, in our real nominal GDP, derived from the value of goods is expressed in current prices. Kung ano yung mga current prices natin, ito yung mga nakapaloob sa ating nominal GDP na tinatawag. So, sa ating nominal GDP, kung papansinin natin, ito yung mga
Juliet, singit lang, tama. Yung nominal GDP na yan kasi, yan yung kabuuan na pinaka-gross. Wala pang deduction diyan. Pag nagpumasok yung real GDP, i-deduct na diyan kung ano ba yung mga percentage in terms of inflation, no? Diyan magkakaroon ng decrease in terms of the GDP. Pag tinignan niyo yung nominal, malaki. Pero pag naging real GDP na yan, lilit na yan. Kasi nga, ibabawas na natin dyan yung mga expenses, especially yung mga inflationary percentage. Kaya, bababa yung GDP talaga. No? Pero sa actual niya nominal, okay yan. Parang yung sumasahod tayo, di ba? Pag sumahod tayo, ito dapat yung sahod natin. Pero because of the deductions, kung may loan ka, kung mayroong mga withholding tax, malilesen yan, kaya bababa yung salary. Ganyan din yung sa GDP. So sa GDP, sa real GDP, pag nakita nyo, ang baba niya. Sa nominal, mataas. Pero sa real GDP, bumababa siya. O sige, go ahead, Jules.
Okay, sir. Okay po. So, yun nga po ang nagiging problem natin dito sa ating economic situation. So, pagdating sa ating GDP, yung sabi nga ni Sir, bumababa na yung ating percentage. So, paano nga ba sa ating economic growth rate? So, affected pa rin yung ating economic growth rate. So, because sa ating real GDP growth rate, pag binawas na lahat yung mga ng inflation, ano na lang yung papasok sa ating growth rate. So, by comparing the result of real GDP to nominal GDP, na sabi nga ni Doc, na nagkakaroon tayo ng GDP price deflator. Okay? Bumababa yung ating GDP.
Yes.
So,
It will deflate
yun yung ating nagiging problem dito sa ating economic
from
growth rate sa
inflation
ating
to deflation.
bansa. So, dito sa ating GDP, based dun sa value of goods or services produced in our economy, kumbaga yung ating output, okay, ng ating expenditure, tapos yung mga kinoconsume natin. So, pag kinompute natin yung ating GDP, kumbaga ito nga yung i-present ko sa inyo na talagang ang baba ng ating GDP. So, the GDP for economists and investors is very important measurement of sa ating ekonomiya because both economic production and growth have a large impact on nearly everyone within a given economy. So when the economy is healthy, sabi nga, kung maganda yung ating ekonomiya, so there is usually a lower level of, kumbaga, sorry for na nagkamali. So pag dito sa situations natin, dito sa ating ekonomiya, sa ating bansa, so ang number one na nagiging problem natin is unemployment. Yun nga yung sinasabi ko sa inyo, na nagkakaroon tayo ng problem sa ating economic growth rate. So, pag nagkaroon tayo ng problem sa ating, for example, sa ating business cycle, nagkakaroon tayo ng unemployment na maraming nawawalan ng trabaho. For example nga ngayon sa nangyari sa atin, ngayon sa ating economic situation, sa nagkaroon tayo ng pandemic, maraming mga nawalan ng trabaho. So, nagde-decline yung ating GDP. So, yung nagkakaroon tayo ng kumbaga recession, okay, ng ating GDP. So nagkakaroon ng downturn, bumababa yung ating GDP because of the unemployment rate na tinatawag. So para sa ating iyaano ko lang yung ating economic growth rate ng ating bansa ay talagang bagsak na bagsak at hindi natin alam kung paano tayo makakabangon because yung ating GDP talaga ng ating bansa ay napakababa. So sabi nga dito, based sa ating Philippine economy, dito sa fourth quarter of 2021, sabi dito sa ating kumbaga survey that with the government optimistic that growth will accelerate this year despite resurgence in coronavirus cases and inflation risk. So, nandito pa lang tayo sa situation ng, kumbaga, medyo umaano pa lang tayo, nagle-level 1 pa lang tayo para, kumbaga, yung ating mga investors ay makapasok sa ating bansa. Ito pumasok na naman yung ating problem ng inflation sa langis. So, paano tayo makakaahon sa ating economic situation? So, paano natin yung ating economic growth rate? Paano natin maiaangat? So, hindi pa tayo nakakaangat dito sa ating situations ng ating coronavirus cases. Ito na naman, pumasok na naman yung ating problem sa ating inflation rate ng ating pagtaas ng langis because of the situation ng ating ng gera sa Ukraine at saka sa Russia. So, yun yung ating tinitingnan kung paano nga ba yung ating gross domestic product growth, kung paano natin ito masusolusyonan. So, sa ating situations, yung ating GDP, the Philippines is aiming to achieve GDP growth rates of 7.0% to 9.0% for 2022. So yun yung ini-aim na ina-achieve ng ating bansa para sa ating GDP. Kaso nga lang yun ang kumbaga ang daming pumapasok na problem na dapat na yun ang pagtuunan ng ating gobyerno kung paano nga ba masusolusyonan yung mga problems na ng ating ekonomiya na ating kinakaharap ngayon para yung ating gross domestic product ay tumaas. So, yun yung natin sa ating, kumbaga yung dito sa report ko, na ang ating, sabi ko nga, the economic growth is typically measured through GDP. So, sa ating bansa, nakakalungkot ng ating measurement ng ating GDP ay talagang napakababa. Hindi natin alam kung paano itataas. So, siguro yung mga mga candidates natin ngayon sa ating darating na election, sana mapagtuunan ng pansin ng kung sino man ang manalo, yung sa ating tinatawag na GDP, kung paano nga ba masusolusyonan ang ating economic situations, okay, dito sa ating GDP para yung ating economic growth rate ay tumaas. So, yun nga yung mga in-explain kanina ni Doc sa before ako nag-report na talagang kumbaga yung ating economic situation doon sa nuclear natin ay kailangan mapagtuunan ng pansin ng ating kumbaga mga politiko. Kasi ang na-observe ko lang sa ating mga politiko, kumbaga sinasabi nila lagi na kailangan itaas natin yung ating GDP pero hindi nila alam kung paano nga ba nila ito patataasin.
Mm.
So, yun yung ating nagiging problem sa ating economic growth rate. So, yun lang po yung aking report based sa ating economic growth rate ay talaga sa ating GDP. Dapat pagtuunan ng pansin kung paano nga ba itaas yung ating GDP. Kasi ito yung, dito natin mini-measure yung ating economic growth rate. So, ko lang po, kumbaga i-share ko lang na yung ating utang sa Philippine Central Bank ay talagang napakalaki na ng ating utang. Paano pa natin, kumbaga, kung titingnan po natin talaga, paano natin iaangat yung ating economic growth rate sa ating bansa. So, yun yung number one problem kung bakit ang ating economic growth rate ay talagang hindi natin maiangat. So, sana nga yung ating mga politiko, yung darating na presidente ng ating maiboboto ay matugunan ng pagtuunan ng pansin yung ating economic growth rate kung paano nila ito masusolusyonan lahat yung mga problema na natin sa ating bansa. And yun nga, mai-share ko lang na talagang ang Pilipinas ay napag-iwanan na yung ating agriculture na yan yung ating number one na economic kumbaga resources, okay, sa ating bansa para sana yung ating economic growth rate ay maitaas, kumbaga masolusyonan yung ating economic growth rate. Yun lang po sir yung aking report about sa economic growth rate.
Okay, palakpakan niyo si Juliet. Maririnig ba yung palakpak dyan?
Sorry sir, hindi ko talaga
Okay.
na-emphasize kung buo yung ating economic growth rate.
Maganda.
Ito yung okay po.
Maganda naman yung discussion natin sa economic growth rate na yan. Tama nga yung sinabi mo na sana meron isang, kasi lahat naman ng mga yan matatalino eh. Tama, alam nyo, dapat meron tayong sa research and development, yung R&D. Ano ba talaga yung dapat i-prioritize natin sa ating ekonomiya para maka-move tayo forward? Kasi ang nangyayari ngayon, kalat-kalat yung mga nila eh, hindi walang ipina-prioritize. Ano ba yung unang dapat mong i-prioritize para makapunta tayo dun sa next step ng economic growth and development? Yun ang mga, kaya nga lagi tayong economic growth. Ilan dekada na tayong economic growth. We haven't yet experienced economic development. It's always economic growth. no? So dapat meron isang matalino, lahat naman niya matatalino na ipa-prioritize. Ito na napansin ko, no, kay President Duterte, no? Kay President Marcos, President Duterte. Na ano nila nagse-set sila ng launch yung mga infrastructure. Sana itong mga infrastructures na ito na ginagawa ngayon, wag sanang pag may dumating na bagong presidente, wag sanang huminto, tuloy-tuloy pa rin. Kasi yun nga matapos lang yung mga infrastructures na yan roads, bridges, railroad. Susunod na dyan, yung empowerment ng agriculture natin, no, to have food security. Kasi we can be an industrialized country naman. But the thing is, kailangan din natin ng food security. Unang-una, dumating yung problema ng COVID-19. Pagkatapos naman ng COVID-19, nagka-problema naman tayo ang ating ekonomiya sa langis, no? $100 per barrel, naging $112 per barrel. So, yan yung mga problema na dapat nating napaghahandaan. No? Kung yung presidente natin ay may mga pinaprioritize, yung mga nakaraang presidente na dapat kinontinue nila kung ano yung mga naudlot na mga proyekto ng nakaraang administrasyon. Ikino-continue yan Kasi for the benefit of the Filipino people. Kasi sino ba magmamalasakit, no, kundi kapwa Pilipino rin. Dapat ganun ang nangyayari. So kamukha nito, ito. Kaya yung mga botante natin dapat maging matalino kasi dito nakasalalay ang ekonomiya ng bansang Pilipinas. Titignan natin dito kung ano ba talaga ang kakayahan nila upang yung ekonomiya, kasi number one dyan yung ekonomiya, paano mo mapapatakbo yung ekonomiya? No, sa likod na napakarami na nating utang. May utang tayo sa Estados Unidos, may utang tayo sa China, may utang tayo sa Russia, may utang tayo sa Japan, may utang tayo sa South Korea. So, ang dami nating utang diyan. May utang tayo sa European Union, may utang tayo sa United Kingdom of Great Britain. So, paano ba? Ano bang gagawin natin yan? Kasi, di ba, kamukha niyan, yung capital formation natin last week na pinag-uusapan, dapat sa capital formation, hindi liability yan. Pag natapos mo yan, yung project na yan, dapat it will produce asset, no? Na ang magiging system yan, kabayaran doon sa mga utang na dapat na mabayaran. At dapat ma-prioritize sila na pag nag-loan tayo, within that specific period, mabayaran natin sa oras para wala tayong atraso. Kaya lang ang nangyayari mula sa mga nakaraang administrasyon, binibigyan tayo ng moratorium, no? Moratorium upang what do you call that? Upang makapag-ipon tayo ng pera na ipambabayad sa utang, no? Mga moratorium o kaya naman idine-default tayo. O sige, ito yung babayaran mo monthly, yearly, tapos i-default ka namin, papautahin ka namin ulit. So, dodoble na yung babayaran natin. So, yun ang nangyayari sa ating ekonomiya. Alright? Yun ang nangyayari kasi actually ang isa pa dito nating yung culture of corruption. Ang corruption sa bansa natin, kultura na. Kultura 'yan no? Hindi na maaalis 'yan. Talagang ang daming ang dugo natin, hindi naman dugong Pilipino, na halo-halo na yung dugo natin. No? Ang dami ng pumuntang mga foreigner dito mula pa nung mga panahon ni Raha Sulaiman, Lakandula, no? Magat Salamat, hanggang ngayon iba na. Iba pa rin, halo-halo na 'to. Kaya ang susi diyan, sino kaya ang sino kaya ang Pilipino na makapag-iisip kung anong maaaring diskarte, unang hakbang para masolusyonan yung ating paghihirap na ito. Kasi sa akin, ang nakikita ko dyan, guys, Yung unang solusyon talaga diyan sa ating ekonomiya, kaya tayo na kasi hiwa-hiwalay tayo, 'di ba? Mga isla tayo. 7,107 islands. So, ang mangyayari niyan, isang pinuno, kamukha ni President Duterte, ipinapaayos yung mga tulay. Kamukha niyan, marami na tayong interlinked bridges, kamukha ng Cebu, Cordova, interlink. Tapos meron na namang Bataan, from Mariveles, Bataan to Naik, Cavite, interlink bridge, no? Na ginagawa. Kung yung interlink bridge ng Cebu, Cordova is the longest bridge in the Philippines today, yung Mariveles, Bataan to Naik, Cavite will be the longest bridge in Southeast Asia. Yun ang mangyayari, no? Pati yung ating subway train from Valenzuela to Naya na dapat maituloy yan, lalo na sa susunod na presidente. Iyon ang susi natin eh. Ang susi natin dito, yung mga infrastructures regarding transportation para maipadala. At susunod dyan dapat yung digital infrastructure na sinasabi ni Bongbong. No? Kasi ang bagal ng internet natin para sa mga transactions, no? Business transactions, kasi ngayon we're more on technology. Dapat mabigyan pansin din yan from road, bridges, infrastructure, digital infrastructure, empowerment of agriculture to secure food security within the Philippines. So, yan ang mga kailangan natin. Dapat, pag natapos yan, doon tayo usad. Pag natapos yung mga infrastructures na yan, no? Road, bridges, railroad, digital, pag natapos yan, doon natin makikita, uusad at uusad na yan. Matapos lang yan. Huwag lang yan mabimbin. At pag nabimbin yan, wala nang mangyayari talaga. Ganito pa rin tayo. Kaya sana, yung susunod na presidente, magaling siyang economic manager. Magaling, no? Magaling din siyang economic manager. Kamukha nitong si Tatay Digong, no? Political will lang ang kailangan diyan. Yun na nga. So, ang susunod ngayon, natapos itong infrastructure to, guys, ang dapat isunod diyan, digital. At pagkatapos diyan, siguro dapat simultaneously, dapat spontaneous yan, spontaneous ang infrastructure saka yung bridges, railroad, road, saka digital. Spontaneous yan. Tuloy-tuloy dapat yan. Tapos, isa-simultaneous natin yung empowerment of agriculture. No? Unti-unti, i-empower natin. Kamukha nung panahon ni President Marcos, ang agrikultura, sana kung lumakas yan, developed country na tayo. Kasi nung panahon ni President Ferdinand Marcos, meron na tayong, what do you call that? Masagana 99. IRI, International Rice Research Institute sa UP Los Baños. Then, tinayo niya yung food terminal dyan sa Bikutan, Taguig. Pagkatapos yung National Food Authority, NFA, for the rice, no? Yung ko-control ng ating supply ng rice. Kaso yan, lahat na naudlot eh. Actually, nagkaroon lang ng political turmoil yan noong mga panahon na simula nung ma-assassinate si Senator Ninoy Aquino. Nung maiplat yan at ibinintang yan kay President Marcos. Doon na nagkaletse-letse yan. Pero before that, okay na. Pero nung mangyari yon, doon na nagkaletse-letse. No? Nagkaroon na ng mga human rights violation, nag-appear na lahat yan. Hanggang syempre, yung mga investors dito sa loob ng Pilipinas natatakot. So nagkaroon ng political turmoil eh. If there is a political turmoil, there will be a political instability. Kaya nagkaroon ng instability, lalo na 1984, 85, 86, hanggang mawala, hanggang magkagulo-gulo. Diba? Hanggang bumagsak ang ekonomiya. Dati, ang $1 dyan, magkano lang? 2 piso, 5 piso. Ngayon, nung maupo si President Cory Aquino, naging 15 piso, $1, hanggang maging 20 at 25 piso. no? Hangga't ibinenta lahat ng mga privately owned company, mga GOCC ng ating gobyerno. Hanggang panahon ni Boy Benta, ni President Fidel Ramos, binenta rin niya yung National Steel Corporation na tayo ang nag-export ng mga bakal noong mga panahon na yon, ibinenta na number one na bibigay sa atin ng pera, yung NSC, ibinenta. Lahat yan no? Petron, naibenta. No? Naibenta na rin yung Philippine Airline. No? So, ang daming nawala na pag-aari ng ating bansa. Kaya nga sabi ko diyan, alam nyo guys, to manipulate and to control what we call as inflation, dapat meron tayong mga subsidies. Meron tayong oil subsidy, meron tayong food subsidy doon sa mga small, medium enterprises. Dapat we must support that. Kaya nga ngayon, dapat sinusuportahan yan ng gobyerno ngayon. Sinusuportahan naman ng gobyerno ngayon yan. Kaso nga lang, syempre, patapos na yung termino. Yung susunod na termino, na susunod na presidente, dapat magbigay siya, i-empower niya yung mga small and medium enterprise. Nagsulputan niya mga small, medium enterprises kasi kinatay ni President Duterte yung mga oligarko. Kasi before President Duterte, the political situation in the Philippines is administered by an oligarchical system. Ito ay pinamumunuan at pinapatakbo ng mga oligarko, mga business tycoon na nasa likod ng mga presidenteng nakaraan. Yan ang problema. Siyempre, kung ikaw presidente, bibigyan ka sa account mo ng 10 million pesos every month. What can you say? So, 6 years ka. No? 6 years ka, meron kang 50 million every month. So, what will happen sa lahat ng mga business tycoon na yan sa Pilipinas? Kaya, alam nyo, yung mga oligarchs na yan, may mga connivance yan. They connive, they collaborate to control the price within the Philippine economic system, no? Which is supported by the president itself, no? The past president itself. Kaya yan ang napakasaklap ng mga pangyayari na yan. Alright? Okay, so sino yung susunod na reporter na discussant natin? Yung susunod discussant natin, sino yung susunod natin?
Ako po, Doc. Market forces po.
Ay, ito maganda to, market forces naman to, nako. Lalo na pag pinag-usapan natin yung mga market structure sa mga ilang meeting pa. Alright, so we're going to talk about the market forces. Alright, so sino to? Si Jeff? Jeff, ikaw yun, Jeff?
Yes po. 2 reporters kami, Doc. One is Miss Tessa po. Later. Pero sa second part, sa introduction lang po ako, demand and supply.
Sige. Okay. So I'm going to mute the mic and then just go on, Jeff, okay? I'll just listen.
Sure, Doc po.
So, yun nga po yung problema natin sa ating bansa na sana Teka lang guys.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff. I'll be reporting market forces. This is a 2-part reports. One would be the introduction for demand and supply. The other one is the market equilibrium and effects in the in the economy and the government. Okay, the concept of demand and supply are useful for explaining what is happening in the marketplace. This is where we are able to determine the flow of economic activity for particular goods and services. It is every market transaction involves an exchange. Of course, when we exchange goods or services, there's an equivalent cash or currency on an agreed amount. Then a market is a place where we buy and sell goods and services. Of course, the buyer demands for goods and services from the market, and the seller supply the goods in the market. With this, it can assist the managers in predicting changes in production and input prices. Also, the managers can make better decisions regarding the kind of product to produce, the quantity, the numbers of items to produce, and the cost of the products. And also, they can be able to determine at what price they can sell the products to the market. First, let's discuss or tackle the demand. Demand is the ability and willingness to buy a specific quantity of a commodity at the prevailing price in a given period of time. Demand for commodity implies the consumer's desires to acquire the good and the willingness and the ability to pay for it. What the buyers pays for a unit of specific goods or services is called the price, and the total number of the units purchased at the time at that price is called the quantity demanded. As you can see in the pictures, a person can purchase iPhones, shoes, petrol or oil, and the cars. Of course, based on their capacity to pay and the willingness to pay with their currency, which is peso in the Philippines. Or they can even use credit cards. Credit cards also is a form of cash payment. However, there's a leeway or there's a due date when you need to pay the credit cards. But still, you'll be using cash to pay for the credit cards. Then with demand, we have demand schedule. Demand schedule is a table that lists the various quantities of a products or services that someone is willing to buy or a range of possible prices. In other words, it's a table that shows the relationship between the price. Here's the price on the left side of the table of the goods and the amounts of the goods consumers are willing to or able to pay at that price. On the right side, as you can see, the quantity that a particular person can buy out of the price. On this example, I have candy, just to make it simpler. Market demand is the sum of individual demand. Might you can have that. Of course, different person has different wants and needs, right? If we add those individual demands, that's the market demand. Demand schedule can be shown as the points on a graph. The graph lists the price on the vertical axis and the quantities demanded on the horizontal axis. Each point on the graph shows how many units of the products or service an individual will buy at a particular price. The demand curve is the line that connects these points. I'll be showing the graph or the sample of the demand curve on the next slides. The demand curve slopes downwards. As you can see in the pictures, the trend of the graph is going down. This shows that people are normally willing to buy less of a product at a high price and more at a low price. Just like on the graph that I've shown you earlier, if at the price of the candy, when the price of the candy is 5 pesos, the consumer would only be willing to purchase at 2 pesos, 2 pieces for a candy. And if the price is at 4 pesos, the consumer can buy only 4 pieces of a candy, and so on and so forth. According to the law of demand, quantity demanded and price move in an opposite direction. If the people want to buy something, given there's a limited supply, the price of that thing will be higher. supply tends to increase the price. As you can see, there's an inverse relationship between the price and the quantity. The quantity of the commodity demanded is a given period of time increases as its price falls, and ceteris paribus means other things constant. Only two things are being compared here: the price and the quantity. The rest are remains constant. On the demand curve, this one is a graphical representation of the demand schedule. I have here the demand curve at the bottom and the schedule at the top. If we plot that schedule into a graph, this will be the result. Price of the vertical axis, 0, 1 peso, 2 pesos, 3 pesos, 4 pesos, 5 pesos, and 6 pesos. And the quantity on the horizontal axis, quantity of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. As you can see, the curve slopes downward. Change in demand curve. We buy products for their utility, the pleasure, usefulness, or satisfaction they give us. Different persons have their own wants, right, and needs, as well as the capacity to pay. We may or may not have the same utility. We also have different demands for products and services. One reason the demand curve slopes downward is due to diminished marginal utility. The principle of diminishing marginal utility says that our additional satisfaction tends to go down as we consume more and more units. Like for example, when we purchase a pizza, normally we can buy per slice, right, or per box. Let's say we buy your first slice. This first slice will satisfy your needs. Uh, but after eating that particular slice of pizza, you still felt hungry. Tendency you will buy for another one. But when you're already full or already ate in your satisfaction, you will no longer buy for another one, right? The make or buying decision we consider whether the satisfaction we expect to gain is worth the money we must give up. Changes in quantity demanded due to the price change occurs along the demand curve. For example, at 3 peso per candy, the quantity demanded of candy is 6. As you can see on the graph here, 3 and 6. But an increase in the price of a candy from 3 pesos to 4 pesos will lead to the decrease in the quantity demanded of a candy from 6 to 4, as shown in the graph. There are demand curve shifters, which is actually the response to that responds to the following factors. We can use acronym BITTER for the demand curve shifters. The first one is the buyer. The buyers or the population changes in the number of consumers. If the size of the population is more, the demand of goods will be more. The market demand for commodities substantially changes when there's this change in total population. Next one is income. Changes in consumers' income. This is directly related to demand. Change in income of the consumer significantly influences its demand for commodities. Of course, the more money you have, the more uh, the the more capacity that you have to pay for a particular product, even if it's for expensive one like iPhones or signature clothings and bags. For the taste, it changes in preferences or popularity of the products and services. These are very effective factors affecting demand for a commodity. When there's a change in tastes or sometimes change in habits or preferences of consumer, the demand will change as well. Passions and customs in society determine also the demands a particular person have. Next one is expectation. Changes in what consumers expect to happen in the future. Let's say you feel that in the next month you'll be promoted as a manager or director of a company. Tendency you will have more income or there's a promotion, there's an increase in your capacity as well to purchase. Hence, the demand for products for your wants and needs will also increase.
Okay.
Then related goods, we have complements and substitutes. With the related goods, prices of related goods affect on demand. Substitute goods is a product that can be used in the place for another. The price of the substitute good and demand for another goods are directly related. For example, the price of the Coke and the price of the Pepsi. An increase in price of one leads to an increase in demand for another. Another example for that is laptops and tablets.
Okay.
Also, and music downloads are there are substitute goods. Then the next one is complementary goods. Complementary goods is a good that goes well with another. When goods are complements, there is an inverse relationship between the price for one and demand for another. For example, Jan is peanut butter and jam, um, um, fruit jam. Um, in the case of complementary goods, fall in the price of one commodity lead to the rise in demand for another goods. An increase in the price for one leads to decrease in demand for another. If the price of computers rises, people buy fewer computers. Hence, the software cost will be lesser as well. Another example is the tuition and the textbook. If there are fewer students enrolled in a government or private schools, the demand for textbooks would be lesser. Again, it's our inverse relationship.
Okay. So that is considered to be as an inverse relationship.
Several factors will change the demand for the goods, shift the entire demand curve. An example, suppose consumer income increases, the demand for candy at all prices will increase. So the curve shifts to the right. Demand will also decrease due to the changes factors other than price. Let's say, for example, there's a health issue with the candy. The demand curve shifts to the left. Changes in any of the factors other than prices causes the demand curve shift, either decrease in demand shifts to the left and or less demanded at each price, or increase in demand shifts to the right, more demanded at each price. Okay, I have here some practice for demand curves. Um, First one, let's say the income in the Visayas region declines after Typhoon Odette hits. When that happens, the demand curve shifts to the left because
Yes, it will shift to the left
there's a
because
decline in the income,
it's a
so the capacity
decrease.
of the person to purchase diminishes well or
Yes.
will be lesser.
Shift to the left.
Next one,
It's a
when
decrease in
Boracay
terms of
restored its
demand.
beauty and cleanliness after 6 months of rehabilitation, there's an increase or double in the tourism. Hence, the demand curve shifts to the right because there's a more demand for the services of the Boracay because of
Okay.
its of the new Boracay that we have right now, which is more clean and
Tourist spot.
more peaceful place to visit
Yeah.
and stay with to have your vacation.
Even
Then
Siargao,
let's say
no?
there's a tablet. The price of the tablet decreases. Tablets are substitute goods for the computers. So the demand shifts to the left. The price of computer software decreases, which is the complementary good for computer. As I mentioned earlier, if the price of the computer increases, the price of the software also increase. So the demand shifts to the right. The computer manufacturer decides to add money back guarantee on their product, which increases the popularity of them. With this money back guarantee, the demand curve shifts to the right. Many people begin to believe that they have that they may lose their jobs in the near future due to the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia. With this particular scenario, the demand shifts to the left because losing job will definitely lessen your capacity to pay for a particular commodity. The next one, the supply. Supply refers to the various quantities of goods or services that producers are willing to sell at a possible market price. Supply can refer to the output of one producer or to the total output of all producers in the market. That's market supplies. The same with the demand. We have supply schedule. Schedule is a table that shows the quantities producers are willing to supply at the buyer's prices. Again, let's say for the candy, um, if the price of the candy is at 5 pesos, the supplier would be willing to supply 10 pieces of the candy. But if the price of the candy is 1 peso, the supplier um, would tend to supply only for two pieces of candies. Supply schedule can be shown as a points on the graph. The graph lists prices on the vertical axis and the quantity supplied on the horizontal axis. Each point on the graph shows how many units of product or services a producers or a group of producers would be willing to sell at a particular price.
Then what's next?
The supply curve is a line that connects these points. The supply curve slopes downward. As the price of goods rises, the quantity supplied rises, and the quantity demanded falls. As the price falls, the quantity supplied falls, and the quantity demanded rise. Of course, normally people would not buy a commodity that has a higher prices. That they would right now people would tend to look for a substitute for a product or a sales or even surplus that would substitute their needs.
The next time I'm
The low
going to buy
supply holds the
a
producers
whiteboard para
will normally
magamit ko rin
offer
sa likod ko.
for sale of higher prices, and then
Yes.
on a particular graph that we have earlier, um, as you can see, the slopes is an upward trend. Um, Again, if the supplier is selling at 5 pesos, they would sell 10 pieces of candies. If the supplier sells a particular candy at 4 pesos, they would only be willing to sell it for 8 pieces, and so on and so forth.
All right.
Changes in supply curve. The reason for the supply curve slopes upward is due to the costs and profit. Producers purchase resources and use them to produce output. Producers will incur costs as they feed resources away from their alternative uses. Yung resources here would be the manpower or the raw materials that they're using to produce a particular item. Businesses provide goods and services hoping to make a profit. Of course, no businesses would establish a business just to gain loss or just for pleasure. Definitely, businesses would establish or build one for profit. Profit is the money a business has left over after it costs after it covers all its costs. When we present this one, of course, we have sales, and after sales, there's a cost of sales. Cost of sales could be again raw materials and direct and indirect materials, and other expenses that the company incurred when doing the particular item. There's administrative and selling expenses as well. Aside from that, there's also taxes, which is an additional expense for a company. Once they deducted all the expenses, that's the profit. Businesses try to sell at prices high enough to cover their costs with some profit left over. Sometimes they do 50% margin, 30% margin. When there's a there's a when the company is having a hard time selling the item, they would lower their prices at 10% margin and even at 5% margin.
Okay.
They don't actually sell it at the benchmark or at the cost itself. Normally, they sell it above the cost. The higher the price of a good, the more profit a business will make after paying the cost of resources. Again, change in quantity supplied due to price change occurs along the supply curve. At 3 pesos per candy, the quantity supplied of candy is 6. But if the price of the candy fell at 2 pesos, then the quantity supply would fall at 4 candies only, as shown in the graph. These are the supply curve shifters.
Po, Sir Jeff,
Yes,
sorry
sorry.
for the interruption po. Yung PowerPoint niyo po ba ay nagagalaw po? Nasa first slide pa rin po eh.
Sir, first slide pa rin, sorry. Yes,
Opo.
magalaw
Nasa
natin.
ilan na po. Opo.
Hold on. Can you show my? Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes po, sir.
Sorry for the earlier. Again, I'm already at the supply curve shifters. These are the supply curve shifters. We can use Stoner, STONER, for the abbreviation. The first one is subsidies and taxes. These are the government subsidies encourages the production, while taxes discourage the production. Again, subsidies, these are the incentives given by the government for a company to supply more products. Like right now, with the oil crisis, I believe government already has a budget of 2.5 billion pesos for the oil subsidies.
Oil subsidy.
Then for the taxes that discourage the productions, normally these are the value-added taxes and also excise taxes. Excise taxes for cigarettes and alcoholic drinks. Then technology improves the productions and ability to pay to supply. Of course, when we have new technology, the faster the production we can have the faster productions, then we can supply more products to the public or to the market. The next one is other goods. Businesses consider the price of goods they could be producing. Then the next one is number of sellers. How many firms are there in the market? Number of sellers, mostly at the competitors. We have active market, and perfectly active market. Active market, there are numerous sellers. Then for the perfectly active market, there's a bunch or number of sellers. Then expectation, businesses consider future prices and economic conditions. Expectation again, like now with the ongoing war in the Ukraine and Russia, there's a tendency for an increase in price for a particular commodity, aside from oil. Hence, the supply would be willing to supply more of that particular products. Then resource costs of a factors of production that will influence business decisions. Again, resource costs, the raw materials and production staff or laborers or direct and indirect materials in producing that particular item. Sorry, nag-move ba yung slides?
Nasa 30 po, sir.
Slide 30.
Slide 30.
Okay, slide 30 pa rin.
31 na po.
Okay. Changes in supply, several factors will change the demand for goods, shift to the entire demand a supply curve. An example, suppose that there's an improvement in the technology to produce a candy. Again, the supply shifts to the right. Next, when supply can also decrease due to the factors other than change in price. As an example, suppose there's a large number of candy producers to go out of business, nalugi, or bankruptcy, then there's a decrease in the suppliers. So tendency, the supply curve shifts to the left. Again, changes in any factors other than price causes the supply curve to shift either left or right. Decrease in supply shifts to the left, then increase in supply shifts to the right. Okay, these are the sample effects of the demand curves in the with by the demand curve shifters. Cost of resources falls. Let's say there's a decline in prices of plastic material, then the cost to produce for an item decline. And tendency, we can create more supplies out of that particular plastics. Then the supply curve shifts to the right. When the cost of resources rises, tendency the cost to produce is higher. Then the amount to supply is lesser. With this, the supply curve shifts to the left. When the productivity decreases, because of the efforts that are being given by the laborers, they're willing to do the work. The cost produced is higher because tendency they would need to extend hours to produce, or we may need for additional laborers to produce a particular product. Then the tendency for the supply to decrease. Then the supply curve shifts to the left. But when the productivity increases, like for example, the motivation being given to the laborers, the cost produced is lesser, and the amount of supply is higher. And the supply curve shifts to the right. And when we have the new technology, of course, it would cost. We will have lesser cost to produce a particular item because of the new technology, faster productions, and lesser manpower to do the job. Then tendency for the supply is to increase because machines can produce more compared to human. So amount of supply increases, then the supply curve shifts to the right.
Okay, okay.
For the higher taxes, of course, is an additional cost to produce of a particular item. Tendency, the cost to produce is higher. The amount of supply is lesser. Then the supply curve shifts to the left. For the lower taxes, like tax incentives that are being given to producers or companies, this happens last pandemic, 2020. Before we have 20% income taxes. Right now we have 25% income taxes, and we also have uh, percentage taxes from 3% down to 1%. So this is a good incentive for for companies, which means their cost to produce is lesser. Then the supply amount of supply is higher. Then the curve shifts to the right. Government-based subsidy, again, like what I mentioned earlier, government subsidy for the oil, um, the cost to produce is lesser, and the supply is higher, and the supply curve shifts to the right. Again, other examples that I have here is like for example, the City of Manila adds subsidy to tablet production to support students with their online classes. With the supply curve, again, since there's a subsidy, the supply shifts to the left, like to the right.
It increases.
Computer producers also produces tablet. The price of tablet goes up. When the price of tablet goes up, of course, a shift to the left,
It will decrease.
the supply curve shifts to the left. Then the city of government adds new taxes for computer production. With this one, the supply curve shifts to the left.
Decrease.
Computer producers expect an increase in the popularity of gaming computer worldwide. When this happens, the supply shifts to the right. And the price of gaming software, a major input gaming software production, increases. With this one, the supply curve shifts to the left. Workers are introduced to energy drink, which increases their productivity dramatically. With this one, the supply shifts to the right. That's all for the demand and supply curve, Doc. Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, so market forces of demand and supply. Okay. Now, in terms of, kasi if we're going to talk about market forces, there are different structure of what we call as the market within the Philippine economy. Now, in terms of looking and studying for the market structures of our economy, that is that will be a different meeting, no? Because we're going to focus on that market structure for only one meeting, so that we can talk about what are those market types. All right. So we have competitive markets, non-competitive markets. We're going to study monopoly, oligopoly. We're going to deal with the monopsony, oligopsony. But for now, we've discussed the demand and supply happening within the market. All right. We all know that if we're talking about demand, an economic manager must always depend on the demand before an economic manager supplies something, all right? Because supply depends on the demand, and the demand depends on the consumer's choice, no? Kasi it's very important that the demand will depend on the consumer's choice of product or item. And then the supply or the supplier or the seller must depend upon the demand. So if the case is that the supply will not depend on the demand, no? If they will not depend on the demand, kasi sometimes it happens, there will be a surplus, no? Kung marami yung kanyang sinupply, magkakaroon tayo ng surplus, no? If gusto niya talagang kumita ng pera, there will be a surplus. But it depends upon the demand, no? Of the consumer's behavior. But if an economic manager, if an economic manager is very, what they call that, keen in terms of his or her observation regarding the economic condition, there will be, or it will pose as a shortage, no? So nakaabang lang yan. Yan yung mga magagaling na mga economic manager. If there is a shortage, that's all right. We will supply once again. All right? But those who supplies in terms of a surplus condition, yun yung mga risk taker. They are a risk taker. Kasi ang risk taker, dalawa lang din naman lang patutunguhan yan eh. To profit or to meet bankruptcy. All right? That is what we meant by that. But for now, regarding our situation here, because of the problem in terms of the Ukraine and the Russian conflict, no, the oil dependency of our economy to China, in which China also depends its oil supply on Russia. So nagkaroon ng economic problem within our Philippine economy. Because we are not prepared. So ayan ang sasabi ko, dapat the lawmakers, no? Kaya nga Diyos Mayo, there are lawmakers. Yung mga lawmakers na yan, dapat yun na tinitignan nila. What if there is a conflict? what are we going to do? Dapat sila yung nagbapasa ng mga batas regarding this economic problem. Another thing is that oil subsidy, even though we have an oil subsidy, it's different from the presidency of Marcos during those time. We have an oil subsidy during those time, and yet we owned Petron, an oil refinery. All right? An oil refinery. But as of from now, we have an oil subsidy, but we do not own Petron. So we don't have any oil refinery. So the thing is that even though we have an oil subsidy, still the prices will increase. But we can only decrease the prices at a minimum percentage. Not unlike if we own Petron. Kaya nga 'di ba? Si Ramon Ang nga si Ramon Ang sinabi ni magulang din si Ramon Ang no, business tycoon. Ibebenta daw niya yung Petron kasi nga nalulugi na siya, no? 'Di ba? It was heard throughout the news, no? Pati mga tabloids and broadsheet na Ramon Ang is willing to sell Petron to President Duterte, to the government. Kasi raw sabi nalulugi na siya. So siyempre, tayo naman, kung ako si President Duterte, bakit mo ibebenta sa amin yan kung nalulugi, no? Anong gagawin ko diyan sa kumpanya na yan na nalulugi naman pala? So, President Duterte didn't automatically say yes, no? There must be a study conducted before we succumb to the wish of Ramon Ang, a business tycoon. 'Di ba? So, ang galing ni Ramon Ang sinabi niya binebenta niya kasi nga nalulugi siya. So, 'di ba? Study the statement of Ramon Ang, no? I'm selling it na kasi I have a bankruptcy because of that company. So, what do you meant by that? All right? What do you meant by that? Parang ayaw mong ibenta, 'di ba? You don't want to sell it. Kasi ibig sabihin, ibinebenta mo siya pero meron kang mga sinabing disadvantages, no? Na siyempre, yung buyer will be reluctant, no? Magkakaroon siya ng pag-aalala. All right? Para bilhin niyang kumpanya na 'yan. So that is what but if we have a great economist, no? Economist within our Philippine economy, that can be given a certain solution, all right? There will be a solution for that. Kasi, look, we have a precedent during the time of Marcos when we own Petron and we have an oil subsidy. We controlled the oil supply in the Philippines. We controlled the price. We monopolized or we oligopolized the price. We monopolized the price in terms of the price of the oil here in the Philippines, oil industry. Now, if we can control the price of the oil by empowering Petron during those time, Caltex and Shell will follow through. Because if Petron's price is lower than the other competitor, Caltex and Shell will follow through. Susunod sila sa Petron. Because if not, no one will buy to Caltex and Shell. So, yun ang kagalingan nung panahon ni President Marcos. No? Sumunod kayo sa gobyerno. Pag hindi kayo sumunod sa gobyerno, di taas nyo yung presyo nyo, basta't yung Petron, which is owned by the government formerly, ganito lang ibebenta ang isang litrong gasolina, isang litrong crudo, isang litrong kerosene. Ito lang ibebenta. So those gas stations will follow Petron. Kaya yun ako, naiisip ko yun Kasi oil refinery yan. Kaya pag ni-refine mo yung oil, tataas lalo yung bayad kasi i-refine mo pa may payment yung refining na yan. Kaya nga refining company, may babayaran mo pa yung refining. Na, what if we own the refinery? O di we can, yung refinery? Mapapamura na natin ng refinery because it's from the government, no? The government owns it and we have an oil subsidy. And we can control it, no? We can manipulate the control of the oil in the market. Not unlike now, no? Unlike now. hindi na natin makokontrol yan kahit sabihin natin may oil subsidy. Tataas at tataas yan. Kasi we don't have an oil refinery. Kaya sabihin ng iba, bakit nyo pa bibilihin yan? Oil refining company lang naman yan. Hindi naman umaangkat din tayo ng langis sa ibang bansa. Yun nga pinagkaiba eh. Umaangkat tayo ng langis sa ibang bansa, tapos dadalhin natin sa oil refining company yan, babayaran na naman. Babayaran natin yung importation ng oil per barrel, i-refine natin yan, babayaran pa natin yung refinery, pagkatapos itatransport yan, may bayad pa yung transportation yan, ibebenta sa market. So, triple na yung babayaran. Not unlike if we own the refinery. Kasi if we own the refinery, we are also the one who will deliver it, no, to those gasoline station. Alright? Not unlike during those time talaga ni President Marcos, maganda yung regulation of the economy. Sana ngayon ganun din, no? Sana ngayon darating na administration mabigyan ng pansin yung darating na bagong administrasyon ng presidency. Alright? So, yan ang problema natin. O yan, kamukha niyan, nagkaroon ng shortage ng supply ng oil. Meaning to say, tataas ang price niyan kasi the demand is very high. But if we depend on meron tayong nuclear power plant, no? Wala tayong problema eh. Kahit nga yung independent power producer ng Meralco na kinukuhanan ng kuryente, dumedepende rin sa langis yun. No? Umaangkat din ng langis yun, nagbabayad din yun. Kaya nga dito sa atin, pag tumaas ang presyo ng langis, abangan nyo, lahat yan, susunod-sunod yan, tataas din yan. Kasi nakadepende. Actually, yung mga factory, no, mga company, they depend as well on the oil industry. Alright? So, yan yung sinasabi natin na noon pa. Na kung naisipan na yan ng mga mokong nating mga mambabatas na dapat hindi lang tayo nakadepende sa langis, no? Hindi lang tayo nakadepende sa mga fossil fuel. Hindi tayo magdepende sa hydro, sa solar, sa geothermal. Mas malaking maitutulong ng nuclear energy. Dapat noon pa, hindi tayo nahihirapan. O kamukha ngayon, problema. The solution is to have a nuclear energy. No? Nuclear power plant. Yan ang solution dyan. Para mabawasan yung hirap natin. Ang inaano ko na, sabi, ay wag yan, nakakatakot yan kasi nuclear yan eh. Tanga. Pag sinabi nating nuclear, dalawa yan. Nuclear na ginagamit sa energy at nuclear na ginagamit sa weaponry. Iba ang weaponry, iba ang energy. No? Ibang energy. Ang nuclear power plant, yan ay i-maintain mo lang naman yan ng 24 hours. May shifting yan na magbabantay. No? Kasi kailangan nating ma-prevent yung overheat niyan. Pag overheat ng tinatawag nating nuclear turbine, yung umiikot, yung humihigop ng tubig para gawing steam. Ini-steam para maging energy papalabas. No? It's 24 hour. There are shifts, 3 shiftings, no? How come, di ba? How come? So, that is what we meant by that.